from the Toronto Star. I'm Reggie Munder, and this matters. It sounds like something straight out of a Martin Scorsese movie, where the longtime head of a mob family is gunned down in broad daylight while sitting in his armor-plated SUV. One of his henchmen uses his car to ram the attackers, leaving behind a bloody scene of injured and dead gangsters. But this wasn't Hollywood. This was the scene in a Burlington parking lot on July 10th of this year, which left Pasquale Pat Musitano dead. He was a notorious member of Hamilton's underworld, and since then, the body of one of his business partners was found burned in the woods. It has all the markings of a story of mob justice focused on revenge or retribution. The police say the investigation is ongoing, but there is no person better to tell us about this story than the Star's Peter Edwards. He's a Toronto-based reporter who mostly covers crime, but has written over a dozen books on organized crime. He had several run-ins with the Musitano family, including with Pat, and will share those experiences with us. Peter, it is a pleasure to have you on This Matters once again.
Thanks for having me back.
You know I love talking about this crime stuff with you. Peter, let's just start right at the beginning. Who was Pat, or should I say Pasquale Musitano?
He was the last of a big mob family in Hamilton. There were the big three families. He was the last of the Musitanos, but he didn't really fit in. He didn't have kind of the finesse of some of the other ones, and he had a huge kind of anger issue, aggression issue.
You've met and spoke to this gentleman, correct?
Yeah, once he said, "Thank God your mother loves you because nobody else does." Which, and then I went and I told that to my mother, and she sort of grimaced, and I said I was going to say, "I'm not so sure about you, Mom." Yeah, like I was going to say that to him, and then I thought, no, it's not the time to go for a cheap laugh.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Musitanos and sort of the hierarchy of crime families in Hamilton? Now, the Ndrangheta, I believe, are main players. Were they affiliated with them, or were they rivals?
So that's a really interesting question. That kind of goes to the heart of a lot of it. They started off there, then they went Sicilian. There's a huge Sicilian guy in Montreal, Vito Rizzuto, who's no longer around, but I got in with him, which a lot of the people from their group didn't think was so great. But Pat got in with Vito Rizzuto. Then Rizzuto died. Then Pat's kind of flapping in the wind where he's isolated from a lot of the Ndrangheta families, but he also doesn't have a Sicilian link anymore.
You've been covering this family for decades. There's two things I would like to bring up. One, let's talk a little bit about the family. It seemed like everybody in it got a violent end. But beyond that, tell us a little bit about them. Tell me some of your favorite stories. I can tell you the one that, I've just read in your reporting recently about, I think the father of the family started a tire fire and then tried to charge the city to clean it up. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was kind of my introduction to them. Was there was a big tire fire 30 years ago at the biggest tire dump in the province. And so I did a Freedom of Information request about who's got the second biggest tire dump, what else is out there. And popped the Musitano family, and it led me to meet with Pat and his father. And his father had been convicted of paying a hitman in a mob hit. And then Pat, and you could tell, really was kind of chomping at the bit to get into that sort of thing. And Pat told me that how easy it would be for someone to set a fire in the tire dump. That would be a big problem. And so they should get the money from the government so that they can clean it up. And so what that meant was they were being paid to create a mess, and then they were being paid even more to clean up the mess. And there was a story in the Star about that on the front page, and then the premier said these aren't the kind of people we do business with, and their grant application was yanked, and that's when Pat became really upset with me. I got a razor blade at the Star. I got an angry letter, and that went into capitals calling me evil. It was kind of a classic Ndrangheta threat. I mentioned that to Pat's father, and he said it wasn't from me, but if you're being threatened, take it seriously. And so, that was from him. But with Pat, he accused me of a whole bunch of indecent acts, and then I just sort of was kind of just losing it.
Tell me about the family's business. I believe there was a gravel hauling company, but were they involved in sort of the classics, drugs, intimidation?
It's funny because there wasn't really that much in the way of drugs, but for a while there, Pat was involved with a hotel in downtown Dundas. That's a really historic place, the Collins Hotel, and someone smelled gasoline, and so the fire department was called, and there was this big elaborate effort to burn the place down to collect insurance. And I think there were half dozen people living in the hotel at the time. But Pat was kind of more into environmental fraud and that sort of fraud. And then he got a lot of power out of Montreal. He was kind of in the end, it was sort of Pat by himself. I got to know Pat's uncle quite well, and Tony, and I actually got along with him very well. And I think he moved out of this stuff. Like, he was into extortion and doing some pretty nasty stuff in the 70s. But I think that towards the end, he died a couple of years ago. I think he just thought, just isn't the way to live. And sometimes he talked to me about what it was like to be a little kid in the 50s and to see that some beaches had signs, no dogs or Italians, and he kind of reacting to a lot of that sort of thing. But he had heart trouble. He, I think, just got sick of the whole life, and he moved off to Peru, and we used to talk about what it was like for him to restart his life out there.
In terms of the Musitano family, there was a couple times that their actions were caught on wiretaps, and sounds like they were plotting to kill people. Is that fair to say?
The people they were talking about ended up shot, so I think that's a fair assumption. There was one famous hit, Dominique Rocco, whose dad ran a bakery on St. Clair Avenue West. He was shot to death, and there were a lot of theories about why, but it was a power shift in the Ndrangheta. He also owed money. He was a drug user, and he couldn't handle his debts. Some of these guys, if you don't pay your debts, they're really serious about it. I mean, that will get you shot. Pat had a janitor killed because the guy got behind in gambling debts. If you think about a gambling debt, I mean, the person hasn't actually taken anything from you, but to kill a father of 5 over that is pretty heavy-handed. But it did get other people to pay him up.
One of the articles you wrote was about sort of the last couple of years of Musitano's life. Basically, he had left in Ndrangheta. He'd gotten with the Rizzutos of Montreal, the Sicilian family. I believe Mr. Rizzuto was killed, and sort of that created a power vacuum. So Pat basically was by himself and in hiding for the last couple of years, right?
Yeah, it's kind of odd because he sold his house where he lived for like half of his life, and he sold it shortly after 3 people in a Mercedes with Quebec license plates showed up. And, in that world, this is a good way to find out how fast somebody can run. Like, that really puts the fear into them. And now a lot of the hits are being contracted out, and a lot of times it's a Quebecer and nobody knows what they look like. Like, it's just someone who just shows up for the job, and so you can't prepare for this person because you don't know who he is. But the Quebec plates, it was kind of a cocky touch because it means they weren't, they thought they could do it so cleanly they could just get back into Montreal or wherever. So it was kind of interesting. A friend of his, 76 years old, a little guy, really tough little guy who had been a friend of Pat's father, he saw the car and rammed it. Like, he just took a run at it with his car, and then those guys took off. After that, Pat just dumped his house, sold some of the furniture. Like, some of the furniture came with the house, and then he owned a lot of properties, and he just floated from property to property. And so he was a hard guy to nail down. He kept the same vehicle, though. He had an armor-plated Denali SUV, and so you could see him coming, but you didn't know where he's coming from.
Okay, Peter, I just got to stop, because obviously you've been talking to these people for years, and like what you just said to me sounded like, a little guy, Joe Pesci, and then he just saw Quebec plates, so he rammed them. That's straight out of the movies. Come on.
I can give you stuff about talking to their hitman too. Like, I got to talk to their hitman a bit.
Yes, no, tell me. What did their hitman have to say? Who was he?
See, that was interesting because the hitman, he thought he had his own code of ethics. That involved don't do it in front of the family, don't suck up to him and pretend you're a friend. He somehow found it really disgusting that some people fake friendship to get someone to lower their guard. He thought it was honorable that he didn't. He tried to miss once and he didn't miss, and so he killed a guy. He said he's hoping the guy could get away, but he couldn't handle the gun and he ended up killing him. He had a drug problem, and so he was paid $3,000 and a bag of cocaine. He said that he killed 3 people, but there were 6 more he was supposed to kill that he didn't. The number actually could have been higher because at one point he's supposed to go into a coffee shop and just open fire and on a rival family. And so, Lord knows how many he would have killed there. Then he found out that Pat wanted him killed, and so then he flipped and became a cooperating witness with authorities. But that's one guy who, if you take it at the low end of what he said he was told to do, you're up to about 10 murders from Pat. Pat was quite the rough guy.
You actually did say to me earlier that Pat took cues from the movies. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's funny because he had his gangster voice, and it's sort of like Tony Soprano without the whatever likability you found in Tony Soprano. I didn't really find it in Pat. I mean, we got off to a bad start and stayed there, so maybe there was something I missed. But It was odd because there's a rival family, and when the police raided the rival family's place, they found a signed cast poster from The Sopranos, and that probably drove Pat crazy, that they got the signed poster and he didn't. These are people that he sort of lived off. With Pat's uncle, Tony, we actually got along well, and I was connected to the TV series Bad Blood on Netflix, and Tony said he liked it because the main character gangster was Irish, and he pointed out I'm part Irish, and so then he pointed out, not every gangster has his bloodline, and it was a good thing that we brought that across. And so it was kind of an odd little bonding moment there.
Let's get back to Pat. So he's in hiding for the last couple of years. He has this armor-proof car. Tell me how he died.
That gets pretty interesting because he had a meeting in Burlington at a strip mall parking lot by a furniture store. He's traveling with someone who a lot of people considered his half-brother. Others called him his cousin. Sometimes the guy used the last name Musitano. His real name was Avignon. And then the other guy was the crusty little man I told you about who ran the car with Quebec plates. And so those three were meeting in the parking lot. Somewhere in there, Pat got shot to death. The little man got injured very seriously after ramming the car of someone else. And then the half-brother/cousin left unscathed, like he wasn't injured, and so it's sort of whatever sense you can make of that.
Who's Grant Edward Norton?
He's someone who he had trouble with the law on things like theft, fraud, but not a gangster. He was involved with Pat in a gravel hauling company, and it's a lot more lucrative than it sounds. When there's a big construction project, you have to get rid of all that dirt that's dug up, and that means you need trucks, you need a place to dump it, you need permits. There's a whole bunch of things you need. And so Pat and this guy and some other people were involved in a company that would dump gravel. And it kind of went back to Pat's old business of dumping tires. If you dump something and don't have the permits, it's a lot cheaper. So Pat was doing that with this guy, Norton. Norton got into a fair bit of trouble in Niagara region. He was arrested for theft and fraud, and he stopped going to court appearances. And so he was on the run, but on a lot lower end than Pat, but he just wasn't showing up for court appearances.
And his body was just recently found in the woods.
Yeah, and there's some chilling stuff about that because bodies found in the woods in a part of East London, Ontario, but it took them 2 days at a forensics lab to determine it was him, and they didn't know that it was human remains at first. That's sort of all I know there, but that kind of makes your head spin, like what condition was he in that they didn't know he was human? And he went missing officially July 6th is the earliest I've heard that he actually went missing. So he was killed right around the time that Pat was killed. So the obvious thing was his death part of an overall plan to hurt Pat's group?
And right now, police say there's no link between the two.
They say they haven't found a link, but they'll let me know when they do, sort of thing. So, not quite let me know when they do, but that's a smart way of doing it, though. You just have to follow what you've got in front of you, and it's good to forget the theories and just go with what you can prove in a lab. And so that's a very smart answer by that detective superintendent from London. That's the right answer. That'll take you through in court as well. What I think there could be is that Pat's death removed this guy's protection, and so all of a sudden it becomes open season on people who were kind of being pretty cocky because they're connected to Pat. Now Pat's gone, and a lot of people who were owed money are demanding that they get paid now. And there's one guy who did get paid by Pat shortly before his death, and the guy bragged on the internet about how much money he collected, and so I'm sure that infuriated a lot of other people.
You mentioned this gentleman before. I think his full name is Giuseppe Carmelo Pino Avignon, who was the third man who left unscathed from the scene, supposedly. This is a gentleman who felt so close to the family, he's called himself Joe Musitano. Since the death, however, it's been reported that the word rat was painted on the garage door of a home that he owned. Is that correct? And then secondarily, putting two together, is this where the betrayal, if this was a movie, happened?
The first part, yes, it's true. He was half-brother/cousin, very close to the family, came over from Italy, lived with the family in their small Hamilton house through his teenage years. He's one of the guys who was involved in that hit we talked about earlier in the secret recordings of conversations in a prison. So he did some pretty heavy-duty stuff. The rat part, maybe, but on the other hand, if you spread a rumor about someone, that's a way of killing them without having to get your hands dirty. And so maybe that's what's going on too. I mean, if you want to get rid of this guy or get him out of town and you're worried that he might do something to avenge something, write rat on his garage door and that'll get rid of him. So a lot of these guys are capable of Olympic level lying. And so the rat thing could be someone who cared about Pat. It could be someone who just wanted to drive Avignon out of town, and that's a good way of doing it.
Peter, what is this about? Is this about old scores being settled?
A lot of it's just about power. Like a lot of it's just about creating space for people. I think that Hamilton's pretty central between Toronto and Buffalo, and there were the three big families. Now there's only one, and the two main people from that, the Violis, are in prison. And so Papalia's, they're out of the way, Musitano's out of the way, so there's a big gap. And I think a lot of this is just about filling the gap. And I think that people from Woodbridge, one big family, is probably sizing it up pretty well right now.
What does happen next? Do you expect there to be more violence, as generally we see some sort of void that someone's trying to fill in the underworld scene in Hamilton?
I think there'd be debt collection violence because a lot of people got cheated. A lot of mob stuff is fraud. Like, we think of it as big violent things we see on TV, but a lot of it's really fraud. And Pat was really into environmental fraud. A lot of people got cheated. There's a lot of truck drivers who weren't paid. There's a lot of investors who got tricked. There's people whose businesses were ruined. And with COVID-19, where people are stretched pretty tight as it is, then you don't just laugh off a big debt. And so I think what Pat offered to the group, I think, was his name and the fear factor connected to his name. And with that gone, I think a lot of people who owed money are kind of unleashed right now.
Peter, it is always fascinating talking to you about this stuff. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you think that we should know?
Not really. This is more of a stay tuned type of thing. It's odd, but I've got a list of business partners of Pat, and I'll keep that pretty close because now I've got to scan a whole bunch of things to see what's happened to who, because the Norton thing, that came out of the blue, but makes total sense. And there's a lot of people like Norton. Norton wasn't a one-of-a-kind guy. There's a whole bunch of other people who, frankly, I would have, now that I've looked at it a little more, I would have thought they'd be quicker to become a target than Norton. And so some of those guys are probably either figuring out how to pay their debts or figuring out how to get out of town.
Peter, I hope you follow this story. I definitely will be watching. I want to thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Peter Edwards is a reporter on the Crimes, Courts, and Justice team at the Toronto Star. That's it for today. Thanks so much for joining us. This Matters is hosted and produced by me, Rajan Mudler, Adrian Chung, and Saba Etizaz. Produced and mixed by Sean Pattenden, and our director of programming is JP Foso. Our show theme music is by So Called, and our episode music is by Mike DeAngelis. We want to hear what stories matter to you. Please send us comments, questions, or ideas to thismatters@thestar.ca. Please consider supporting the journalism the Toronto Star newsroom does at thestar.com. And don't forget to subscribe to This Matters on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Let's talk soon.